Hi, this is Misha, and I've been asked to do more videos on the FAL. Apparently our 5-part series from a year or so back was reasonably popular. Unfortunately, I don't really have any new FALs to show you. The market has unfortunately been pretty uneventful. So I thought we would just kind of re-examine some. Why not? If this is boring to you, feel free to go somewhere else, but I thought we'd talk about this L1A1 here. In its video, I went into the history, but I want to talk about this gun here and how it's in the USA. This is an actual British L1A1. It was made by BSA and is complete. Of course, it's been through multiple refurbishments, has the Sunkerite finish, has the Marinil furniture instead of wood. Not that it probably did, but this rifle could have served in the Falklands War. Now, obviously, you don't normally see military guns like this in the US. Usually we have to do semi-auto builds. This one kind of fell into a special niche, and a few hundred were able to come in. It helped that the British L1A1, also known as the SLR, self-loading rifle, was always intended as a semi-automatic only rifle. Here's the selector, does not go forward. We just have two positions, so it's really just a safety, or change lever, the British call it. So from the beginning, they adopted a semi-auto version of the FN FAL. This is called the inch pattern. The reason they call it the inch, we have some different features kind of unique to Commonwealth guns. For example, we have this style of birdcage flash hider. This is the later 3-port. The original had a 5. We have a small bayonet lug underneath it for this type of bayonet over here. Still have a 21-inch barrel. We have a tall open ear front sight. Have these handguards. Like I said, originally they would have been wood, later they're Marinil. The front sling swivel can also double as a stacking hook because it has a cutout in the middle. A little unique to the inch pattern, we have a folding charging handle. Now, FN would use the folding charging handle on their paratrooper versions, the 50.63 and a few other variants, but it was standard on the L1A1. We also have a little bit different shape to the carry handle, as you see, from a normal standard FAL. The dust cover has these little flanges in the back. What these are, they're actually vestigial. Although they don't hurt anything, they basically keep the dust cover from going too far forward. Now obviously on a cover like this, the nose will keep it from going too far forward in the receiver. But originally these were made for the version that would take a stripper clip. If you look at the Canadian C1 and C1A1 in the early trials guns that these were based on, and also the American T48, you'll notice the dust cover is cut back here with a stripper clip guide. This is so we could top off our magazine as an alternative. So that's why these little tabs are still on the back, and the receiver is cut out to take them. They might have also helped stabilize it a bit because the British used the suit scope quite a bit. Moving on, the rear sight folds, which is pretty unique. It is the tall style. It also doesn't really have a button to adjust, you just push it. Not the best sight in the world, honestly, but it is what it is. The buttstock on this is, of course, inch pattern. The Marinil ones are solid, no storage compartment. The wood ones would have a trap door. One thing that the wood ones, the British were always kind of conscious of length. They would do small, medium, and long lengths, even back during the infield days, making stocks a different length. And they would continue that trend with the wood stocks for the L1A1. But for the polymer, they got smart. Instead of making all new stocks, they just made different butt plates. And this butt plate's just held on with the screw. I believe they made a total of 4 sizes. So you could set the length of pull by just swapping your butt plate out. Pretty clever. Moving down to our lower, we have the late style takedown, which is kind of a dimpled piece of metal here. It is still the vertical style. They did not go to the horizontal. We have the large change lever we already looked at. We have a magazine release, which is large and kind of cast over to the left side. We have a bolt hold open. However, it is manual only. So it won't hold open on the last shot, but you can hold open manually for cleaning or safety purposes. We also have a unique pistol grip, different from the metric. And also this trigger guard can be folded into it. There's this little screw here. If you unscrew this popsicle comes off and you can fold it into a hollow in here and then reattach it with the screw. And this was for use with winter gloves. Also the magazines for the inch pattern, a little different. They've got this large lug in the front, and they've got this larger base plate held on with an actual button, whereas the metric are almost just kind of pressed on there and held on by tension. So I definitely think the inch mags are more durable, and I think they lock into the rifle more securely too. Interestingly, these will take inch mags based on how they fit because of the larger notch, but they will fit pretty loosely. That's just a little rundown. Of course, there were other differences, but I just wanted to talk about that. So how did these come in? Well, they never came in officially for civilian sales. These were imported by Century Arms. There's a very small import mark on the underside of the barrel. It's one of those few rare times where an import mark is a good thing. Without it, we would have no real proof that this is legitimate and not a gray gun brought over, say, from Canada or elsewhere. But the Century would import these, real marking them very discreetly on the underside of the barrel. And they would bring these in the early 90s. And initially they would bring them in for law enforcement purchase. Now, a lot of times when a gun like this will come in on a law enforcement, it'll be for departmental use, you know, actually registered to a department, therefore it can be a class 3, whatever. However they did it though, the ATF approved these as a standard Title I firearm, so no different than an FAL kit build or a pre-ban semi-Belgian or Argentinian or whatever. And the reason they did this was so individual officers could purchase these. Back in the 90s, they were only made available for police. However, since the officers weren't required to sign any kind of commitment, and since they were legally brought in as Title I firearms, when the officers deemed they could sell them off, and there was no real repercussions. Again, these weren't owned by departments, they were owned by individual officers. And I actually had a friend, actually he's a brother of a friend, but I like to think we're friends now too, who was literally issued or purchased one of these back in the 90s. He was a sheriff's deputy. He had an opportunity to buy one. The price was right because these all, from what I've seen, kind of came in used. None of them looked brand new. They had wear. This is actually one of the nicer ones. They were all serviceable mechanically, but they had finish wear. And so he purchased one to get a good 308 as a law enforcement officer, legitimately. And while this isn't actually his, he held on to his for 30 years. Only recently, well, I guess 25 years, guys, sorry. Only recently selling it to another friend of ours. This one came from a different source, so these were legitimately purchased. Now, I'm sure if officers purchased these with the intent of reselling them immediately, that would be a straw purchase. That wouldn't be good. But, you know, for an officer that hung on to it for 20 years, I mean, you don't expect them to hang on to something forever. I mean, everyone retires, everyone goes away. And so that's how these were able to come in. They only brought in a few hundred. I don't think anyone has an exact number, but it was not very large. I've seen 200, I've seen 300, I've seen a little more, but you get the idea. They did not bring over many. And bringing over a gun like this, it's a semi-only, but still on an original receiver, isn't without precedent. We have the so-called G-series guns, a little over 1,800, brought over in the early 60s, which were converted select fire guns, many of them from a canceled Cuban contract from FN in Belgium. Originally they were declared as machine guns in 1964, but then this was reversed because they had been purchased in good faith and they were grandfathered in. And there's actually a list of serials that are approved on the G guns, so you can check that out. So we had some converted full autos in the 60s that were grandfathered, and then in the 70s, ironically, FN did it again. They accidentally sent over a few thousand auto sear cut, at least that's what people call them, sear cut guns. It's actually not so much a sear as an out of battery safety. It's down here in the thing. So there's a cutout in the receiver, but the ATF considered that to be the no-no full auto part. But they brought over some guns in the 70s that didn't have the sear installed, but they had the cutout for it. And again, the ATF grandfathered those because there were several thousand. So there is already a precedent, actually several thousand sear cut guns in the country. And I guess they figured these L1A1s, only a couple hundred more wouldn't hurt anything, especially being primarily sold to law enforcement officers. But this is really one of the prides in my collection, because I have had pretty much all the major British Enfields at one time, if not all right now. And I just think this really caps the collection off. I would love to have an L85A1, but not because it's a great gun, but just because, but you know, there's never been a semi-auto of those ever made, and now that the Enfield factory is shut down, I doubt there ever will be. So this will probably end up being, along with my AR-180 from Sterling, my most recent British gun. Of course, these run great. These are military spec guns. Century, about the only thing they did was roll mark them. But just thought I'd share, because it is definitely an interesting story of how these came in. You'll see them occasionally. And what's funny, whereas, say, a pre-ban Poirier from Australia, an L1A1A, which they would bring over about 150 complete guns, and then another few hundred receivers from Onyx and Eden and Poirier. These pre-ban semi-only Australians will bring 5,000 to 6,000, whereas these British guns only bring 3,000 to 4,000 max. And I think they're cooler. Yeah, they're not in mint condition. Yeah, the polymer furniture is not as attractive as the wood, but this is a true, authentic surplus military firearm, whereas the Poiriers were always semi-auto and always built for commercial. Don't get me wrong, if someone offered me a Poirier, I would take it gladly. But you see what I'm saying? For less money, I'm actually happier. If you gave me a choice between this and a Poirier, and money wasn't a thing, I would still take this because it has legitimate history. Plus, I have an interest in the Argentinian guns in the Falklands War. And like I said, even though I'm sure this one wasn't technically there, it could have been. Well, if you're interested in FALs, please check out our other videos. We have a number of them now. And if you like the video and want to comment, we welcome that as well. And if you'd like to help to support us get to the range more often, please check out the link to our Patreon page. This is Misha. And please tune in again soon for hopefully another interesting video. We'll catch you then.